Hello, my name is Chris Bradshaw, and I'm a psychologist and psychotherapist in Tucson, Arizona. And today's video is on the question, are we part human, part machine? And my response to a recent experiment that myself and two colleague friends of mine engaged with an AI therapist. That video is also on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is at Fully Human Psychology, and that video is titled, I believe, Three Human Existential Therapists Connect, question mark, with an AI therapist. So I want to approach this from a few angles, kind of analyzing what my experience has been so far working with an AI therapist. But first, I want to caveat what I'm saying with I am not an expert in AI. I am not an expert in AI therapy. I am a relatively experienced human. It's been through some stuff, and I'm also relatively experienced in the mental health treatment field. I've been in the field about 15 years. And before that, I worked in other fields, education and elder care, that were, in my mind, about service, attempting to be of service. So obviously, I think it's worth sharing my initial reactions. And I could change my views over time. I'm open-minded. I consider myself a creative, open-minded person. And sometimes I think that in our society, there is an issue with, maybe call it overconfidence. I don't know if it's really overconfidence, but a need to be certain and to be right really quickly and thoroughly. And I like to resist that, or at least I think I like to resist it. I also like being certain, but I try to question that. I try to be open to the mystery a little bit. So I'm going to attempt to do that here, although I think it'll be safe to say that most of what I'm going to say about AI therapy is going to be negative. But like I said, I'm not an expert in that. So I'm going to jump all around here. I had a list of bullet points of things. I'm also not used to making solo videos. I haven't made a lot of videos. They've always been with other people, which I feel more comfortable with. And I'm trying to look directly into the camera. I'm probably not succeeding. And so I apologize for that, and bear with me. It's a little odd. It's very odd. So let's just start with a banger here. I recently had a chance to present at the American Psychological Association convention. Myself and a wonderful colleague friend, Dr. Sophie Archibald, who's a wonderful social worker and mind-body medicine scholar in Utah, we presented at the convention. And I'll talk a little bit about our topic because it relates in a little bit. But at the APA convention, there was a lot of talk around AI therapy and technology in general, and pluses, minuses, the state of the field. And I didn't go to a lot of those talks, but I did go to some. And one thing that came up was that AI therapy may be able to help with the problem of access. So it could be argued, it is being argued, that there's a mental health crisis in the US, to speak for the US. Not that I really can speak for the US, but I'm going to speak for the US. And I've certainly seen some convincing statistics and studies around that, and I've seen some things in my practice in my life, of course. And yet, in many areas, there is a shortage of mental health providers. And there is certainly cost issues. I make a point of doing a lot of sliding scale and pro bono work in my practice. And I do accept insurance, primarily because of the access issue that I see. And so AI therapy is being touted as potentially helping to solve that issue of access, is my understanding. Here's the issue I have with that. I worked for a long time in Medicaid funded treatment, so with individuals that are living below the poverty line or near the poverty line and economically disadvantaged. And it's already the case, at least everywhere I've lived, that individuals in that situation are likely to get less experienced, less trained therapists who, in my opinion, tend to be under supervised clinically, meaning they're not always getting the mentorship and the support and connection from elder therapists that I think is necessary to do the best type of work. And so saying that AI therapy is going to help access, to me, really feels like more of the problem, or more access to a mediocre service. So right now, if people have spotty access to a mediocre service, are we saying that we're going to give them a lot of access to a mediocre service? From what I've seen of AI therapy so far, is it's not that great. And this is my opinion, and I could go into what I mean by that. And I have an issue with us patting ourselves on the back as a field about getting more access to folks, when they're still not getting what they may need. And I could see a lot of companies making a lot of money off of that and marketing it as, we're meeting clients where they're at, we're solving the access issue, it's on demand, it's perhaps unlimited frequency, it's a fraction of the cost, and they may be able to even produce some outcomes that talk about positives in terms of client experience of it. But I actually think that ultimately where we need to go is more along the lines of what Kirk Schneider, who's a great psychologist, existential and depth-oriented psychologist, what him and others are talking about, which is that we need to be able to provide lower cost or free, depth-oriented, real human being psychotherapy to quote unquote underserved populations. The answer is not to give them access to robots whenever they want. The answer is to give them high quality therapy. Now, I don't want to make it sound like any young therapist who's working in a frontlines clinic is not doing a good job, because that would be ridiculous. And there's some of them, I'm sure, doing a better job than I do, and other people do. And I feel like many fields, therapy is part talent, natural inclination, education, experience, training. There's all these pieces to the puzzle. But I do know from my own experience and from talking to a lot of people that a lot of younger clinicians and older clinicians in those fields don't feel like they get the training and support that they need. So I feel safe in saying that, but I don't want to. There are clients in those settings getting very good therapy, and there's therapists in those settings providing very good therapy. So I don't want to overstate that case, but I don't think that giving people more access to a robot is the answer. And I have a problem with the idea of companies making a killing off of that. And I don't know if it's really happening, but perhaps even lobbying to just get rid of the counselors and therapists in those settings. So I wanted to touch on that with access. Let me back up a little bit. Are we part human, part machine anyway? Are we even more machine these days? Someone recently said, and I wish I had their name handy. I recently heard a very experienced therapist say that humans are becoming more machine-like at the same time that machines are becoming more human-like. We're interacting and interfacing so much with our technology and our screens in this kind of harmonious, disharmonious relationship, that we're becoming more machine-like. Philosophers and spiritual thinkers and psychologists, many of them have long talked about the fact that, I don't know what, I don't, you decide if it's a fact. For me, it's a fact, but that human beings have machine-like tendencies. Okay? And by that, I guess I mean we inherit some programming that's not of our choice, and that programming creates certain thoughts, certain feelings, certain behaviors, regardless of what we may want or like, or another part of us, our more creative or willful or conscious part of us may want. So we have input, and our behavior can get very dictated. Now, I think in a country like the US, that we like to think that we're 100% free, perhaps. That can be a triggering idea for some folks. The idea that they are part machine, or that they're part programmed, or they're not completely in control. In my opinion, the more we introspect and the more we look within ourselves, I don't think that many of us can say that all of our opinions, all of our values, all of our actions are completely of our own choosing. And so I don't want to be naive and sit here and say that I am a fully human superior therapist to that artificial AI therapist. I don't think that would be honest or introspective enough. So I think as we're discussing human therapist, AI therapist, I think it's worth to talk about that humans have automatic and machine-like qualities. Now, I'm being a little poetic or cute by saying we have machine-like because qualities, instead of just saying that part of being a human is having inherited thoughts which program to automatic behaviors. It could be said that it's not technically accurate to say that that's machine-like, that's human-like, that's part of what humans are. So we still are 100% different from a machine that is plastic and or on the in the cloud or in the internet or whatever. It's more useful for me to think about that there are machine-like aspects and automatic aspects to being a human. And so I also think we have a tendency, because of the givens of existence, because of dramas and challenges that are built into being human, because of that, and because of additional traumas, adverse childhood experiences, and other types of traumas, because of those things, the givens of existence and the challenge inherent in the givens of existence, and because of additional traumas we go through, I think we can become very limited in our humanity. We can become very constricted. And I'll give an example of what I mean. So let me start first with an extra trauma originated one. Let's say that an individual is neglected growing up, and they unconsciously develop some self-esteem issues, some issues with confidence. They start to feel somewhat inferior. If my parents, who I love and need, are ignoring me unconsciously, maybe I'm just not that great. Maybe I'm not that memorable. I'm not that powerful or interesting or impactful or whatever. and they go to school and they realize they're good at something. They're good at this thing. And wow, I got some recognition for this. Okay, I'm going to become the best at that thing that has ever lived. And I am going to be beloved by every human being that ever encounters me. And it's going to make up for that hole in my heart. So they do that and they accomplish a lot. And many people love them and they create jobs for many people and they do these difficult things and they help people. But that hole is still there. And whenever there's even a hint of criticism of them, or whenever there's a faint smell of failure or disappointment, they react horribly. And you think of a million ways they could react horribly. Okay. So we could say that that person, in spite of the success and the renown and the fame, they're limited in their humanity, because part of being a human is being free and expanding and being empowered and using our strengths and being confident, being attractive, or all these things that US culture tends to really want to have all the time, right? That's part of it. But also being limited is part of it. Needing to be small sometimes, needing to be humble, needing to learn from our mistakes, needing to allow in something bigger than us, needing to open up to remorse, or also needing to understand that we can't please everybody all the time, or we won't please everybody all the time. And if we try to, it's probably going to burn us out, right? So this person I'm describing can't or won't yet be with those experiences. So that's an example of what I mean about how we can struggle to be fully human due to traumas. Another way is, let's say you have someone that didn't have any or hasn't yet had high intensity or overwhelming wounds or traumas or neglects or abuse or things, but they're born into the human experience, which is inevitably going to be that they have strengths that they want to use. I should add also that socioeconomic and racial prejudice and different things can be those traumas that limit us and restrict us. It can be political, it can be cultural. So let's say this individual is born into the human experience that we all are, which is that they have strengths and abilities that they want to actualize, right? And they have the human needs that we all want to actualize: the need for safety, the need for security, exploration, love, purpose, transcendence, which we can talk about, peak experiences. They have these things that they want to actualize, and yet they're born into an environment where inevitably it's uncertain how much they're going to be able to access. They're going to run into roadblocks and demands, right? And also time. They're going to have a limited amount of time to live, to actualize those things. And so they have strengths, you could say, and needs, and a limited amount of time to actualize them. Also, they have people and ideas that they love, and a limited amount of time to be with and to align with those, connect with those people and ideas, right? So you can see the tension that's being developed, and that can create a lot of energy the more aware you really are of those things. The more you really are aware of the limited amount of time, then you add in the fact that we have a natural human tendency to get distracted, right? To divert ourselves, which can be an enjoyable, fun, necessary thing, or it can become a neurotic or compulsive thing to constantly be pulled away, or to allow yourself to be pulled away from what matters most to you. So these all create tensions and creative tensions. And we can choose to avoid those tensions altogether and to lead a life of quiet desperation or numbness. And today's society, with all the technology and all the things, someone could very easily, not very easily because it'll cause a lot of suffering, but I think you know what I mean, compulsively, automatically spend their entire life entertained, relatively passively entertained, and never actualize their full potential. And they could stay entertained throughout the whole thing. They could stay amused, like shallowly amused, all the way up until their deathbed. Right. So to become fully human, my private therapy practice is called fully human psychology, partially because of the reasons I'm saying, and partially because I believe in shame reduction. I believe in healthy, skillfully managed, poignant remorse and guilt, but not the neurotic beating ourselves up thing that a lot of us tend to do. And I think fully human can also be very destigmatizing, because we all experience guilt, boredom, loneliness, shame, sense of inadequacy, sense of frustration, sense of failure. We all experience these things, just like we all hopefully experience the things that we want to experience more often. Okay, so why am I talking about that? I think a big positive, and again, I haven't read enough about AI yet, but just I can already tell that a big positive that is coming from and will come from the development of AI and the development of AI therapy in particular is that we are going to relearn more about what it means to be fully human. Because you know that they're going to attempt to make the AI therapists more and more human-like, and they're going to try to make it more effective than a human therapist would be. They're going to try to make it as good as possible. And now, unless they realize that there's enough humans to make it financially remunerative for the AI therapist to just be its own thing and to not have to be human-like, but to be its own thing. But it seems like it's heading. They're collaborating with psychologists and therapists, and they're trying to make it like a human being but better. Right. Okay. So in order to do that, they're studying what human beings are. And I personally doubt that they're going to come up with anything that the great philosophers and spiritual teachers and artists and creative writers and different native tribes, the wisdom traditions, the spiritual traditions. I doubt they're going to come up with something that hasn't already been found. But at the same time, I think every generation has to rewrite the books, right? Now, there's obviously some books that last a hell of a lot longer over the spans of all the generations, right? And maybe sometimes for positive and negative reasons. And with positive and negative results, they last, right? So they're likely to come up with things that have already been discovered, but maybe with some new twists for our times and in a new language that speaks to our times. Because that's a big thing, is a lot of the older books, well, the ones that tend to last because they do continue to speak to humans. But some of them, these great books, they still speak to some humans, but not to enough of them. And so those ideas need to be rewritten with a twist and in a language that has the impact. And also, sometimes great ideas, the language around them gets played out, or these great ideas had a big impact in the beginning, and then the language it's watered down, and so it needs to be phrased in a different way that bypasses our automatic convenient thinking and reaches down deeper into us, into our heart, goes through just the thinking into the emotions, into the body, and really wakes something up in us. Many of you, like me, have read something that spoke in a way deeper way, that you put that book down and thought, wow, I'm actually more empowered to really live and to live aligned with my deepest values. This is different from dissociating and watching a show that's hooking me from one episode to another, but then after the show I feel a little depressed or anxious or like I can't quite face humanity or something. That's different from when you consume a piece of art. And it's so, in my opinions, there's levels to this game, and there's levels to a lot of games. There's levels to art, there's levels to therapy, there's levels to everything. And so far from what I've seen by AI therapy, it's a fairly low level of therapy. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about access, we've talked about full humanity, we've talked about, are we human, are we machine? Let me dive into my reactions a little bit to the AI therapist. So I'm going to end up referring to the AI therapist as she, because she had a female sounding voice and her name was Sonia. Okay. So I think it obviously was designed to come across as a female therapist. And I do actually recall, because we all experimented with the same app. We recorded Sushri's session, but we all experimented before the video recorded experiment. We all experimented with this same therapist. So we all selected we wanted a female therapist. And we had the opportunity to slide a dial between how directive or non-directive we wanted the therapist to be. And many of you probably know what that means, or you could speculate on what that means. It's pretty self-explanatory. How much of an active kind of expert or taking charge or educational or exercisey or homework assignment-y do you want the therapist to be? Or how much do you want them to give you space, connect, and maybe some subtle points, some subtle questions, non-directive, right? I get in a nutshell. So we chose kind of in the middle, and there's several things that stand out. One thing is, I think there are safety concerns. I know that we can't nerf the world, and I also know that, like we said earlier, one of the criticisms of therapy is that it can be too darn safe or gentle, and we can forget that as humans, we have moments where we're very delicate, but we're also can be pretty durable, and we can stand to challenge ourselves. So I don't want to make it sound like everything needs or can be 100% safe all the time. There's always risks to therapy. However, in my opinion, I think I saw some pretty cavalier risks to the AI therapy in that you have to sign a disclaimer that you're acknowledging that the app is telling you if you have a major mental health concern or you're suicidal, then this is not the app for you, which I think is good. People breeze through disclaimers all the time. It's good for therapists to, yes, have clients sign the disclaimers and also summarize them for the client and discuss them some. And of course, you don't want your first therapy session to be like buying a home and just going, just reading verbatim all the fine print and everything, but you do need to make sure the person understands that these points of these informed consent and everything. And so anyway, this is a short disclaimer. You had to acknowledge it. When I engaged one of my sessions with Sonia, I started off with something kind of a big thing. I just figured, what the hell? Not a wise move. I pulled back from that because I think her tone of voice was nice. It was kindly. When she was speaking, the pace felt good. I did feel like she was listening to the content of what I was saying. There weren't any major issues with her mishearing me or just not responding to what I said or something. So that part was dialed in. But right away from the first session, she went with that big subject and asked follow-up questions, really consistently timed, one after another. And I started to feel like, whoa, we're going too fast. And I realized I don't trust this person, and they're not a person. And I don't know if I want to get all emotional right now with this. What is this? So I pulled back from that. I actually think what I did is I just paused the call because I realized you could pause and just return to the session at any time, which brings up other things around the container and the duration of the session and the frequency of therapy. And is it good for people to just be like go into this gut-wrenching thing and then an hour later I go into it again? I mean, is she going to pull back? Is she going to suggest that we just met a little while ago? I don't know enough about that. Maybe she is going to do that. But there are reasons why often therapy is 50 minutes to an hour, varying frequencies, of course. But often a standard thing is 1 day a week for an hour. There's kind of a reason for that beyond just calendars and caseloads. There's also reasons for that, I think, psychologically and emotionally. But the timing issue, I feel like most good human therapists would have slowed down that timing some. And would have suggested that maybe we slow down a little bit. It's our first session. We don't need to go into all of this right now. So I didn't see that happening. It could be that I didn't do long enough with Sonia, and I'm going to do longer sessions with her. So I could be wrong about a lot of these things. From Sushri's session, and you'll have to watch the video to learn more about it, but from Sushri's session, something I noticed was I kept getting the feeling that Sonia, the AI therapist, was trying to cash a check. She didn't have enough money in the account, right? It's like the common factors in therapy. If you don't know what that is, I'm going to do another video on it, but look it up. What are the common factors in psychotherapy? Well, one of them is empathy. And another one is the therapeutic relationship. So the therapeutic relationship has been found pretty consistently to be the most important element of therapy in terms of creating positive outcomes. And the therapeutic relationship is often defined. I don't know that you really can define it, but language isn't precise. We got to try to define things. Is the emotional bond between the therapist and the client, and how well the therapist and the client agree on what are the goals of the therapy together and what are the tasks that are going to get us to the goal, right? So kind of this emotional bond, and then agreeing and collaborating on goals, and then the tasks to get us to the goal. I didn't feel like any of that was present in the relationship with Sushri. I feel like Sushree was wanting to connect, and the therapist wasn't able to go there and kept bringing back to, let's get you to do this exercise to cure your loneliness. I understand you feel that way, but let's get back. And, when most human beings, when they're coming to you with something that they've dealt with for a while, when you just kind of do a brief, yeah, I understand what you're going through, but let's get you to here, it often falls flat. It often just falls flat, right? We often fancy, and maybe we're right, that I'll just say, maybe it's not too hard sometimes to figure out what someone else should do. Maybe it's not so hard to figure out what we should do. Um, and yet we all know that it's not so easy to always do it, right? And a common thing that you see with folks is they get frustrated when they go to their friends with the problem and the friend gives them solutions too quickly. Sometimes they do want those solutions. And so that brings me to another thing. If you want a therapist that's going to give you quick solutions and help you brainstorm solutions quickly and just provide kind of an accountability check or a coaching, I shouldn't say just, because that's significant. The AI therapist has something to offer, I think. I saw it more as providing coaching versus therapy from what I saw. I don't think therapy is superior to coaching. I don't think coaching is superior to therapy. One of the big things that annoys me, that I've fallen into it myself, but is when schools of therapy overly compete with each other or badmouth each other, or when therapists and coaches go at it or whatever. I think all of it is a little ridiculous. I think that it's fairly obvious to me that schools of therapy, I'm talking about the well thought out ones that have some meaty theory behind them, that, or if you're a vegetarian, have some fibrous or vitamin rich theory behind them, enzyme rich theory behind them, or some research, quantitative, qualitative. I think it's fairly obvious to me that they're pieces of a puzzle, or there's a continuum and a spectrum. And, to say that one is so superior to others, I think it's human nature that, for one thing, when we're not drawn to something and we're drawn to something else. So let's say I'm not drawn to therapy A. I find it boring, uninteresting, whatever. I'm not drawn to therapy A. I'm drawn to therapy B. It's human nature to then not learn that much about therapy A and to focus my energy on therapy B. Well, then, I don't know that much about therapy A. I probably shouldn't be offering super confident criticisms of it. Why don't I just own the fact that I was more drawn to therapy B? So that's what I know more about. Of course, I probably learned a little bit about therapy A and didn't like certain things. And I went to therapy B. Then, okay, say the things you don't like about therapy A, but say it with some humility and acknowledge that I didn't like those things, so I didn't go a hell of a lot further. And maybe it makes up for it down the road, but I don't want to do it. I don't always do this myself, but I tend to have more respect for this. And I wish that we could come to a place where we can say, I just like this better. This works better for me. And it's got enough theory and research behind it that I think it's ethical to go ahead with it with clients. And I think something similar with coaching. I think there do need to be distinctions between the two. And I do think it is a big deal that therapists have to get licensed and there's an ethical standard. I know there's processes for coaches too. And I think it's good to go through those things. Or if you don't, and I don't think you have to go through them as a coach. And if you don't, then I think it's be good to research on your own ethical standards and then write up your own policies and go with them. I think it's important to not date your clients. I think it's important to not violate their confidentiality. I think it's important to not provide therapy to your family members. Of course, you're influenced by being a coach and a therapist, so you can't help but, I provided therapy for a lot of professionals, different professionals, lawyers, doctors, different types of doctors, veterinarians, surgeons, psychiatrists, psychologists, and veterans and first responders. And yeah, I've gotten to a point where I can kind of tell pretty close to what someone's profession is before they've even told me, often just by talking to them for a little bit. We get programmed and influenced by our professions, and we carry that around with us. There's a certain way psychologists tend to talk. There's huge diversity within psychology, and there's similarities. So it does influence you, but there's still a difference between providing therapy to your kid and being a therapist with your kid is a different thing. So I have some concerns around the safety around AI therapists for a couple reasons. One, I already mentioned is it unlimited therapy? I don't know. Is it just this person just pause, keep going? Is the AI therapist going to scale it back? I'm assuming that Sonia's programmed to stop and tell the person to call 911 or emergency services or the crisis line or to call for them or something. I'm assuming that's built in there. That's extreme. There's also other levels, though. Sonia did pick up on some subtext or the unspoken process. At one point in the session with Sushri, I think Sushri made it kind of obvious. There was a back and forth several times, but Sonia said something like, "I know it can be frustrating." And Sushri had not said that I'm frustrated, but there was enough back and forth or enough tone that the AI therapist picked up on that she was frustrated. She didn't do nearly enough with that, according to my style of therapy, and it wasn't helpful enough the way it was done. But there was some attempt at that. But generally speaking, and this is an audio, she was doing an audio AI therapy. I don't know if there is a video AI therapy. I know there's chat and I know there's audio. There was a lot of nonverbals. A lot of therapy is not only about what the therapist says in response to what the client says or thinks or feels. It's not all about the verbal and saying the thing according to, it's a relationship. A lot of a relationship is the feel and the sense and the intangibles and maybe even spiritual elements if we want to go there. So that all felt like it was missing. And I think there's some safety concerns around that being missed. I've worked in settings where individuals are going into panic attacks or having strong suicidal ideation, and there are fairly formulaic interventions or techniques or exercises you can do with someone in that state. And it can help take them out of a panic attack. Okay. However, I have seen staff member A use this technique with the client and it works. Staff member B uses the technique and it doesn't work. And it would take a whole hour to analyze those situations from all angles. But in my opinion, it was often because of something intangible that the person that did the technique effectively connected and was present and made space energetically or emotionally for the client and was calm in a certain way and picked up on enough nonverbals to time what they said and the way they said it and the tone and the volume and the pace and the waiting and the eyes and the smile. So many things. They said it in just the right way for that person, right? So there wasn't any of that going on with the AI therapist. And that's part of what I think made me feel unsafe. Was it was like, whoa, I'm being pulled by a machine into one of my biggest emotional wounds. Now, some might feel safer with a machine than a human. Most of us have been hurt by other humans. Most of us have not been traumatized by a machine. Okay. The machines we're interacting with may be making our depression worse, or maybe making our anxiety worse, or may our addiction to the TV shows, we're not getting up off the couch, maybe short-term diverting us from our depression, diverting us, and then our depression is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, but we're diverted, and it's getting stronger and stronger. But the trauma that originally made us depressed was probably from a human being. It wasn't from a machine. So there's a safety to our machines. Okay. The problem is that as humans, we are famous for keeping ourselves safe by creating our own prison and then putting ourselves in the cell in the prison and locking it and throwing the key out the window. We're famous for that as human beings. I don't feel safe, so I'm going to construct a prison and I'm going to put myself in one of the cells, and I might pick the nicest cell and really, make it nice, but I'm going to put myself in that cell and I'm going to have the key. And if I see someone coming to outside the cell saying, hey, if you want me to get you out, throw me the key. And I think, no. And then if they insist too much, I might take that key. And if I've given myself a little window with bars in it, so I can get a little bit of air now and then and a little bit of sunlight, I might take that key and no, if you come any closer, I'm going to throw this out the window. And if they keep coming closer and if they're trying to reach through the bars to grab you to make you give them the key, they just throw the key right out the window. Now I'm stuck in here and you're stuck out there trying to help me, right? That's the type of stuff we do as humans. Now, luckily for us, that therapist, let's say, who's outside, oh shit, I guess I tried too hard. Okay, I'm going to leave you alone. But then, they want to be your guide and they want to help you. So they go outside the prison and they go looking through the bushes and they find the key. And they think they have your key. It might not be yours. It might be from someone else threw theirs out the window. But they've got your little key. And they go up there. And they don't say anything. And they're just like, I'm going to sit 20 yards away from your cell. I'm here. I'm here with you. I've helped other people get out of their cell. I've gotten out of my cell. Nobody ever fully gets out of their cell, but maybe the metaphor starts to break down. We'll think about that. But I'm just going to sit here with you. Not just. I am here with you. And if you want to talk, we can talk. We can talk about what's good about the cell. We can talk about what may or may not be good outside of the cell. We can go to page. So you see, I guess my point there is, um, I think in the video experiment that we did, my friends and I said something like, we said that we think that folks won't end up being completely satisfied with an AI therapist. From what I've been able to see, um, a lot of folks don't even want to do teletherapy. A lot of folks want to do in-person therapy. I can't imagine those folks then wanting to come anywhere close to AI therapy if they don't even want to meet mediated by the monitor. But I think there will be folks, and there are folks that I'm sure will prefer AI therapy. And some of them that may be exactly what they need. But I think that it also runs the risk that folks become, through doing AI therapy, folks become even less capable of handling a wide range of human interactions. Because the therapist client relationship is an ancient healing relationship. There hasn't always been therapists and licensed therapists, but there's always been people in a tribe. I mean, let me back up for a second. I was at a cafe once recently, and one of my favorite cafes here, and somehow there was a new employee and two new employees, and somehow it came up that I was a psychologist, whatever. And we got to talking, and they said something like, well, it must be hard for you because there's so much pop psychology going on and so much, you know, everybody's a narcissist now. Basically, if anybody confidently disagrees with you, they're a narcissist, or whatever. If someone cares about more about their own ambition than your emotions, they're a narcissist or whatever. And I said something that was actually misinterpreted, but then I was able to salvage it. But well, I think on some level, everybody is a psychologist. And she thought I was saying, oh yeah, everybody these days is a psychologist. But I said, no, I actually mean, I think psychology could be said to be about why and how we do what we do and think what we think and feel what we feel. Pretty much every human I've ever met is interested in that and looks at that to varying degrees within themselves or with other people. It's part of being human, right? I mean, so I think that, let's see how to put this. Hmm. I'm forgetting where I was going to go with that. Oh, I remember now. So this relationship between therapists and clients, what it really represents is, or why it's interesting in general, why is the relationship between a therapist and a client interesting in general psychologically? I think it's because it's about how human beings can be in a potentially healing interaction with each other. Now, there's all kinds of ways. A mother and a daughter, or a mother and a son, that can be a healing interaction. A father and a daughter and a son, siblings. friends. There's so many ways and configurations and endless configurations, mentor and mentee, um, which I think is something we need more of um, in society. Um, the fact that so, but when you have with therapy with client is you typically have someone who was a stranger, a therapist who was is a stranger on some level, um, being willing to and hopefully capable of being in one of the most healing relationships with you that is humanly possible. Um, the fact that we have machines entering into that, I think, is an acknowledgement of a couple things that may or may not be obvious. There's a couple things is that we recognize that we are perhaps getting more and more machine-like, or we're getting more and more influenced by technology. Our lives are becoming more and more technologically mediated. Okay. And yet we know we need to be fully human, or we want to be fully human. So part of us would like to think, well, can we just make the machines fully human? And then we can be fully human kind of in both ways. Like we can have our machine-like part be fully human and our human part be fully human. I don't know that that's really possible. I think that um, since the technology is here, we might as well um, make it as good as we can. But I think we need to talk about what does it mean to be a fully human being? And what does it mean to be a fully human being with each other? And what does it mean to be healing in relationship with each other? I practice and attempt to live with certain forms of therapy, existential humanistic psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, motivational interviewing, some cognitive behavior therapy. Um, I've trained in EMDR therapy. I don't practice it anymore. It wasn't for me. Um, and each of these approaches addresses this question in one way or another, directly or indirectly, and in slightly different ways. I do dream work a lot with folks. I think people that are skeptical of dream work, I think you would be surprised, because I was skeptical too, about how much meaning and how much dreams can help you access aspects of yourself that you might be cut off from, and help you be with parts of yourself that you're uncomfortable with or judging really harshly. Um, my research that I recently conducted is on the client experience of therapeutic presence. So, what do clients experience when therapists are more or less present with them? And there's some really beautiful definitions of presence out there that I have memorized that I'm not going to go into right now, but are really beautiful, by Kirk Schneider, Sherry Geller, and others. Um, but what my study showed, and this is a mixed method study, so it's some quantitative, some qualitative, but it's not generalizable statistically. I had a small sample. I wanted to go in depth, very in depth, into the subjective world of 6 clients, not my clients in therapy, other people's clients, that's how I did it. Because I, for one, have learned as much about myself and humanity from a Dostoevsky novel, from a Chekhov short story, from a Grace Paley short story, from a James Baldwin novel, from a Picasso art piece, from a Sonny Rollins jazz saxophone solo, um, from a Sarah Vaughan um, song, great jazz singer, from a case study. from one of Freud's or others' case studies of one client over time. I've learned as much about myself and humanity from those as I have from studies that maybe had 450 people in a randomized control trial showing did their depression go up or go down, right? I think both are needed, but I think that sometimes we can get arrogant about our particular preference, qualitative, quantitative, whatever. But so take my study with a grain of salt. For what it's worth, these are 6 clients at the end of the day. These are six humans. I've been in the field a while. I'm a pretty good interviewer, and I think that I question my own biases very hard. But what my study showed was that when therapists are highly present, and we can talk about what that means, when they're highly present, clients tend to feel safe, but they tend to feel supportively challenged as well. So they feel supportively challenged to grow, and they feel safe at the same time. So there's other findings too, but that's really big, to feel safe with someone and challenged to grow, but supportively challenged to grow. We think about that. If in all of our human interactions, if we could help someone feel safe, but also like they're being challenged, but in a supportive way, you have a lot of the yin and yang of humanity right there. Because if humans are just safe, they get bored, right? If they're just challenged, they start to feel in danger, or they start to get fatigued or burnt out if it's all challenge all the time. The need to feel 100% safe and nothing but safe is often a trauma response. The need to be challenging yourself every second of every day can also be a trauma response. Now, I'm someone with 2 master's degrees and a doctorate degree. One of my trauma responses was attempting to be productive and challenging myself constantly. It's not healthy. It's about fear, the fear of the ability to slow down and be with yourself and accept your limits and things like that. So clients safe, supportively challenged. They also, in my study, when the therapist is highly present, the client started to feel deeply seen and heard. If we look at that one for a while, a big part of what clients get from therapy is being seen and heard for their experience and their goals. Oftentimes people grow up in relationships or live their lives with people making a lot of assumptions or telling them what to do or defining them, putting them in a box. This is your role in the family. This is what you're about. This is the purpose you serve. This is who you are. You're below me. This is who I am. This is who you are. This is what your story means. A lot of people deal with a lot of that, or society's doing that to them for a range of reasons. And then, of course, they end up doing it to themselves. So, and also we often feel like a lot of things that we think and feel are not allowed. Okay. So to be deeply seen and heard, so we have safe, supportively challenged, feeling deeply seen and heard. The client also tended to feel that there was good timing happening in the session. There are some beautiful excerpts in my study from participants about timing and things, about how the therapist seems to know when to give them space to think, when to come in if they're going around in a circle too much, how to adjust their voice, their approach, all these things that are very dynamic and that we didn't see with the AI therapist particularly yet. that we didn't see yet. Um, and there are others too, other themes that my study found that I'm not going to go into all of them. But these are especially, I think, human things. And I also think, by the way, if they could program an AI therapist to have these things, to be able to um, have better timing, it's going to be very interesting for them to study what is good timing and how can they get a machine to have really nuanced, sensitive timing and fluctuations of tone and voice and eventually facial expressions and emotions. How can they do all that? It's going to be pretty fascinating. I still think it's going to miss. I don't think there's any way for it to miss this extra secret sauce that humans have. And my theory is this: if you dial in a machine to have, by all measurable standards, and it's always important for us to note that just because these are the measurable standards doesn't mean it's everything that needs to be measured. So if you dial in an AI therapist to have as good of timing by all measurable standards as a human therapist, it's still going to be missing the special sauce. And I think part of what the special sauce is has something to do with the risk of humans, the messiness of humans, the unpredictability of humans, the impulsivity of humans. Those are all things that sound bad. Risk, impulsivity, messiness. There's a lot of forces in societies. Every human that applies for a job has to say they're organized, or at least not mention that they're not, right? When in reality, there's certain personality types that are more organized. Not every human being is that organized, nor does every human being need to be that organized. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but those are all things that sound bad. Okay. And yet, because we have those things, that's why we have to get creative in unique and sometimes original ways, adjusting to our circumstances and our contexts. And it's also has something to do with the risk of therapy. Okay. There's definitely risks to AI therapy, and there probably always will be risks to human therapy and risks to AI therapy. But there's a certain risk to interacting with a human being. And we could experiment with this with just, okay, when I go onto YouTube to scroll, where's the risk in me going into YouTube? When I go outside and interact with my neighbor, where's the risk? When I'm driving down the street, where's the risk? When I go to see my therapist, where's the risk, right? Whatever our answer is to that, when the therapist picks up on, consciously or not, something around that and doesn't abuse you in some way, or manages to challenge you outside your comfort zone while not making your nightmare come true, that can be healing. Or if they do, hopefully not in a way of ethical violation or anything criminal or anything, but if they do step on your toes or something, or they do trigger something in you, or they do let you down or mess up in some way, and they're present enough to notice it and apologize for it and really own it, and not do what most of us have probably experienced, which is someone we cared about hurt us but couldn't own it, or denied it, or turned it against you, or threw it in your face, or did the kind of, I'm sorry I did that, but you, whatever, but doesn't do any of that, but fully owns it. That's often very healing. And when we talk about psychodynamic therapy, psychoanalytic therapy, the transference and the countertransference can be a big part of the healing relationship. And in existential therapy, it can as well. Are they going to program AI therapists to have their own story and their own biases and their own hangups and their own projections so that they can work through it? How messy will that get from an AI therapy standpoint? And I don't think it's an accident that AI therapy has started off with CBT oriented, solutions focused therapy, which I think is a good thing that it started with that. It would have been way harder for it to do something else. But I think there's still dangers in that. There's still dangers in that. You could argue it could be even more dangerous if a client has a deeper issue and is going through a lot of emotional turmoil, and you're an AI therapist who is essentially a mediocre at best CBT therapist, which I feel bad saying that because it's so judgy and shitty sounding. But I think this is my subjective opinion. And so the client has this emotional turmoil, and you're the AI therapist keeping things behavioral and action oriented and trying to stay in the present moment, and you're missing all kinds of nonverbals, and there is no transference or countertransference, which can be problematic in therapy or can be the most healing thing in therapy. That's not happening. There's no relationship. And are we encouraging people to not heal themselves in the risk, in the beauty, and the creativity of a human relationship, where they then leave that feeling expanded, kind of like in that way I described when you encounter some high level art versus when you encounter something that's maybe more of a lower level. It's entertaining, but it's not as deep and moving. And you leave that, you went to the risk of the human therapist. They picked up on things, a lot of subtle, nuanced things, and they used the relationship and some missteps and some ruptures in the relationship, and you get past that and you heal from it and you leave expanded, like, man, I could go out there and I could face the world and I could handle human interactions in a way that feels different when it comes from a human being versus when it comes from a robot. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I'm going to stop there. This went much longer than I thought. Obviously, I thought it was worth sharing. I don't know if I looked at the camera well enough or not. I'm looking at it right now. And I hope that you consider leaving comments for this video. Tell me what I got wrong, what I got right. I'm not overly concerned with getting things right. I'm interested in an honest an exploration as I can. That's what excites me creatively. So I would like to hear your opinions, your thoughts. And if you want to, subscribe and like. And Sophie Archibald and I, who I mentioned earlier, will be starting a podcast at some point, beginning of 2025. And also Sushri Sahu, Gaspar Segafredo, and I are also considering starting a podcast with the three of us. And so those will be some things that I'll be promoting and putting out there so that we can learn and grow together. Thank you for taking the time.